Hare Krishna. Is there anyone else who wants the material going to be shared by Maharaj? Like some of us wrote by email. Yeah. Maharaj compiled some material for the seminar. If you provide him your email address, he can email it to you. But since you
Krishna Krishna Hare
Hare Krishna. Sorry for the delay. Man proposes, God disposes. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pastyatire Satarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is a continuation of a very important and most extensive subject. It's important because everything we do centers around this basic relationship between guru and disciple, and it's complex because there's endless amounts of aspects to it, and within our ISKCON society, the dynamics have been somewhat, what we say, extended beyond the normal understanding of guru-disciple relationship because of the worldwide movement we have. And the principle generally was spiritual master, teacher, guru was someone who was very much a part of one's life on a personal level, always available within the confines of one's area of livelihood, resident. And that is the traditional way. Sometimes the guru, of course, would travel occasionally, but now we have, what I say, a very dynamic arrangement where the guru not only does the work of a spiritual master, but has other responsibilities within the complexity of the ISKCON society, along with the lack of contact with the disciple because of such responsibilities. So sometimes we have to redefine or readdress the relationship in terms of the different dynamics. And therefore sometimes we find that it's not so clear what our relation is or how to access that relation. We spoke about practically every major subject that comes under the heading. We talked about what is guru, different types of spiritual masters, how the guru is one, how the guru is different, how the guru is non-different from the Lord, how the guru is at the same time one and different from the Lord. We spoke about the qualifications of a spiritual teacher, spiritual master. We spoke about some of the disqualifications, or what appears to be qualifications but are not. We also spoke about disciples' qualifications, and this morning's class was disqualifications of a disciple. So it's fundamental on everything we do, but we should understand what really is the relationship. And this is where a lot of what we say persons who come into our movement have a different understanding as time goes by is what is that relationship. That relationship is really based on our relationship with Krishna. As we have an eternal loving relationship with Krishna, but it's inaccessible in this material world due to our, what we say, connection with the material energy. And therefore, Krishna is very difficult to reach. And he can be reached only according to how he explains he can be reached. Of course, we may reach him in different ways, but what is the essence of our relationship with Krishna is defined in Shastras in so many ways. The essence is that relationship with Krishna is never lost. It's only forgotten. But we don't remember that. It's like when you go to sleep, you forget your waking existence. And when you wake up, a lot of times you forget what you dreamt about. So when we leave the confines of the presence of Krishna, we come into this material world, and God seems to be an idea at best, or maybe a conception, maybe. But actually, God is the closest thing that we can come with, because in the tattva of spirituality, which means the philosophical principles that make up existence, there's nothing outside of God. We create inside and outside by our own consciousness, but everything is within God and nothing is outside of God. We are within God and we are at the same time outside of God simultaneously. Outside because we are not feeling His presence all the time, and inside is because everything that is in existence is created and controlled by Him perfectly and completely. So it's a most amazing thing that the closest thing to us and the most hardest thing to access at the same time. It's almost like you have a great treasure in the middle of your house, but you just don't know where it is. And you're looking all over for it. But the thing is, it's in your pocket, and that's the place you forget to look. Because you're looking in the areas outside of yourself. But God is everything, and everything is within God. Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. Maya idam tadam tagat avyakti murtane matstani sarvabhutani nateshu vavastita. Everything is in me, but I am not within everything at the same time. But He is. Why does He say that? He says something that's not correct. Because people think that he's destroying a certain philosophical principle that is not correct. That everything is God. Everything is God, but at the same time, not God. Of course, that doesn't make any sense. How can something be the same and different at the same time? Well, the word is achintya. Achintya means that which cannot be conceived of or inconceivable. So spiritual philosophical principles are inconceivable by us. The mind, the senses, intelligence, and we might even go as far as to say the imagination. The imagination can go beyond the intelligence, but still can't reach to the level of the absolute, because no one can even imagine God. It's just like even when we hear about God, we're not sure if that's correct. Because all we can do is accept what is given to us, like that. But everything that moves or doesn't move is his energy, like that. And we are also his energy, just like this body we have. It's a combination of 8 elements. Krishna says in the Gita, Bhumir apanalobayu kammana bhuri evacha. Ahankar iti bina prakriti astada. Earth, water, fire, air, mind, intelligence, false ego make up my separated. So he's talking about the material energy simply is comprised of these 8 energies, that's all. There's nothing outside of these 8 energies that it's in the creation. But the combination of these things make up the different forms of existence in the material world. So everything you see, and the things you don't even see, because Krishna mentions mind, intelligence, and ego, false ego. You can't see those, but they're also part of the material created existence. So, but of the created existence that we can perceive through our senses and mind, is what makes up our physical, gross body. And what we can't perceive, it makes up our subtle, invisible body, like that. So even the body we have is made up of these 8 elements. So those 8 elements come from Krishna. Or he is the creator of the elements, and then of course under his direction, those elements are assembled in different forms, and that is what is called creation. The Lord glances over the aggregate of material energy, and by his glance, he puts it into motion, like that. So his glance is the fiery energy known as Shiva. So when Shiva is projected into the material energy, he's also called the father of all living entities. That glance is the glance of Mahavishnu, which is the Shiva aspect. And then he glances upon the external energy, and that moves these elements. And when they move, the most intelligent person within existence, Lord Brahma, comes and formulates everything, and there you have the created material existence. So when you look at it, therefore, everything, both animate, inanimate, is actually the energy of the Lord, and it's activated and what we say sustained by the Lord, and ultimately is also destroyed by the Lord. So everything, in one sense, is God, but at the same time, everything is not God. The energy and the energetic are the same. So just like the sun and the sunshine is the energy of the sun. It's also sometimes called the sun, although it's the light of the sun, it's not the sun itself. So that energy is not separate from the sun. There's no question of the sun energy being separated from the sun, but the sun energy is not the sun. But the sun energy is also the sun. So using that example, we get a little bit understanding of how existence manifests itself. Creation exists like that. But beyond all this creative manifestations, there's a realm of existence that is not created and not destroyed. It exists in its own eternal, self-effulgent aspect of its own self. and that is called the spiritual energy, which is not what we say, doesn't have any of the characteristics of the material energy. That is, it's not created, it doesn't change, it's not destroyed, it is not, it needs nothing else within itself to exist. Just like in the material energy, there has to be a combination of the different energies in order for things to happen. But in the spiritual energy, it's self-effulgent, all by itself. That realm of existence is of the same nature of our identity. So we belong to that spiritual energy, but we have no recollection of that spiritual energy. All we perceive mostly the material energy and how it works, interacts. Even that is limited in our own experience. So to access God, what to speak of accessing His energies, is practically impossible. It's not practically, it is. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedaham samatityani vartmanani nani charjunya bhavishyami chabhutani mam tu vedanarakaschana. He says, I know everything in the past. I know everything that's happening in the present. I know all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entity. And then he ends by saying, but me, no one knows. So God, He even says it Himself, nobody knows me. But the goal of our existence is to know God. So how can we do that? By reading books, by philosophizing, by different, means that we create within this realm of, interaction. No, there's only one way you can know God, and that's through God's direction. And therefore, that is called the spiritual master. So the spiritual master is the manifestation of God's mercy to know God through His own, what we say, personal example like that. So as we learn about God, we have to learn that from the spiritual master. There's no other way. Krishna mentions that many times. You have to take shelter of my representative. So what is that shelter? There's a qualitative consciousness that is necessary to access the shelter of the Lord through the spiritual master. One cannot simply remain the way they are and still understand God. There has to be a transformation of consciousness, which will also, what we say, cause a transformation of lifestyle. Because as our consciousness changes, our values also change. And as our values change, our activities change. And as our activities change, everything changes like that. So it begins with changing consciousness. So what is our present consciousness? Our present consciousness is that we are the center. And we see the world in relationship to ourselves. That is a wrong conception. Because of that wrong conception, everything we do is wrong. Everything we do is wrong because we see the world according to our own consciousness. Therefore, we have to see the world and we see ourselves according to the way God sees us. And because His vision is perfect. So the spiritual master teaches us how to see everything through spiritual vision, or correct vision, we might say. So therefore, in order to access that knowledge, one has to perform the activities of a disciple. So being a disciple is not a small thing. And that's why very few people take to spiritual life, because they're not willing to make changes in their life. Most people think spiritual life is another form of material enjoyment, where I can enjoy in a better way. There is the element of enjoyment, which is paramount in spiritual practice, but it doesn't come by way of, our present perception of what enjoyment is. It comes by way of God's perception of how enjoyment is accessed. So in order to access that element of supreme happiness and enjoyment, one has to connect with the path or the consciousness that is conducive to that enjoyment, which is God's way for us. And that's the message of the spiritual master. So what the spiritual master says is like what God says. Now that's a strong statement. People will take exception with that. How is a mortal person able to somehow or other be the person that speaks on behalf of God? Well, that ability, or we might say that empowerment, is coming from the Lord Himself. So as the Lord empowers someone to speak on His behalf, that person can do it. Because, as we mentioned before, God is within everything and everything is within God. So God is not, He is the most prominent thing in all, but His existence is not perceived through perception. His existence is perceived through a medium of activities which changes our consciousness and brings our consciousness to the realm of understanding our relationship with Him and with everything else simultaneously. Because when you understand your relationship with God, you can understand your relationship with everything. Now, if you try to understand your relationship with everything without understanding your relationship with God, which people do, you will never understand your relationship with everything. Because everything is under the control, motivated, controlled, and originated within God. So to leave out the source and to try to deal with the energy separate is what is called a hard struggle for existence. So that hard struggle ends when we take shelter of His representative. And when we take shelter of His representative, we receive unlimited transcendental knowledge, which changes our consciousness and awakens our consciousness to the presence of God in all aspects of existence. So therefore, life itself requires one to take shelter, in order to take shelter of God, to take shelter of God's representative. Now, shelter is an interesting word. It means that when you take shelter of God's representative, you are also taking shelter of God. But what it means is that you can get everything you need in one place. You can get everything you need in one place, or everything you require in one place, as opposed to everything you want. That's different. And as you take shelter of God, you recognize, or the spiritual master, you recognize your real needs, and you can, as you recognize your real needs, they are automatically fulfilled in one aspect of activity, and that is service to God through service to the spiritual master. Because you have to understand one thing. You are never separated from God, but you think you are. That's the problem. We think we're separated from God. We feel separated from God. God seems to be so far removed from our existence. But that is called illusion. So to destroy the illusion, or to get to the reality, the spiritual master is the medium. He's like the doctor that cures the disease. But the patient has to be willing to submit themselves to the doctor's prescription. Otherwise, the medicine doesn't take effect fully. If we keep our own understanding of what spiritual life is like, we will always be baffled in our attempts to practice spiritual life. Therefore, that's why when Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, he wound up everything after speaking practically 600 and maybe 90 verses, 688 verses. He finally, after he gave everything in terms of how this world works, who he is, who we are, what is the basis of activities, the different ways to practice spiritual life. After he gave all this information, he just simply summed it up in one thing. Just surrender to me, that's all. That's all. He ended it by saying, give up your own ideas on how you can benefit your own self and surrender. You've been trying for so many lifetimes and you're not getting anywhere. Why don't you just give it up? So he gets a little strong at the end. After giving us all the knowledge and explaining what is the results of surrender, finally he says, Sarva Dharma Pradiksuja. And that verse is very important in terms of its meaning. Surrender is more than submission. It is submission, but it's more in the sense that Krishna is saying, whatever other ways you think are beneficial for you, forget it. And do it my way. That's what he's basically saying in that verse, 1866. And that's explained in the Naradi Bhakti Sutras in one of the verses, where that verse is taken apart piece by piece and explained in very wonderful detail. Do we have chairs? Do we have chairs for our guests? Get some chairs for everyone. And it's taken apart piece by piece, and finally, ultimately it is, okay, here it is. So, I'll tell you a little story, because you can't figure out spiritual life. The more you try to figure it out, the more confused you get. I'll give you an example of a story. It's an interesting story. It shows how we may think things work, but how things really don't work. Would you like to hear the story? You sure? Okay. There was this one simple man, and he was the cleaner in one temple. Very prominent temple in India. And he would clean, keep the place clean. He was the custodian, like that. And he did this job year after year, day after day. And he was always seeing the deity. And he was always seeing people coming in and out of the temple. So, in his own imaginative mind, he thought, I wonder what people are asking the Lord. I wonder what they're saying to the Lord. So many people come and they offer prayers. I just wonder what it's like. So that night he fell asleep. And in the dream, the Lord appeared to him and says, You want to be me? You can be me for one day. Just so you can understand what's going on. You can be the deity. I'll give you that position for one day. But there is one condition. You don't speak. And he agreed. Now, that condition wasn't so easy to follow. So he's up there, and now he's the deity. So one man comes along, and he's very rich, and he takes out his wallet, and he gives a nice donation to the Lord, and he's praying to the Lord in different ways. Obviously, he wants to increase his wealth. People come to God, they give $1, and they ask for how much? More? Reminds me of one story where one man said to his friend, I'm going to pray to the Lord for $1 million. And if I get $1 million, I'll give half to him. So he went to the Lord and he prayed, and he got $500,000. And then he didn't give anything to the Lord. So his friend said, well, said you were going to give him half. He said, I prayed for $1 million and I got a half. That means he already took his half. So that's how people think. So anyway, this simple man, he's the deity. This rich man comes up. He offers a nice donation. He's praying for more wealth. So in his prayer and in his hurriedness, he forgets his wallet right by the deity. So a poor man follows, and he's saying, my dear Lord, I can hardly eat from day to day. My family is starving. I'm struggling so much. Please provide something for our family. And then after he makes a very sincere and very humble prayer to the Lord, he looks down and sees this wallet. And he thinks, oh, thank you, Lord. That was fast. So he takes the wallet. Now, a third man comes in and says, my dear Lord, I'm a sailor. I'm going on a very dangerous sea voyage beginning tomorrow. Please protect me. Please, preserve my life. Help me out. So while he's praying, the rich man comes back and he's looking for his wallet. And he can't find it. And then he sees the sailor there and he says, oh, you took my wallet. And the sailor says, what are you talking about? He says, you're the only person who came since I left, and then you must have taken it. And so he's arguing with the sailor, and finally the rich man gets really angry and starts to call the police, and they come. Now, he's the deity, and he's not allowed to say anything, right? He sees the whole thing. He knows the sailor didn't do it. So he can't restrain himself anymore. So he speaks. And he says, no, this man didn't do it. He's innocent. God speaking. Oh, the rich man, he bows down. The police, everybody bows down. Oh, the rich man gets up. He apologizes to the sailor. I'm sorry I accused you. God said you didn't do it. Oh. And everything was nice, and he left. So that night the Lord appears to him. He said, I told you to keep quiet. Why'd you speak? That rich man, he's so greedy. He always comes to me asking me for money. He wants more. And so I caused him to lose his wallet. And this other poor man, he's my devotee. He's struggling so hard. I caused him to find the wallet. And this sailor, he was going to go on that dangerous sea voyage, and I arranged for him to get blamed so he could get arrested and go to jail because he's going to die if he goes on the sea voyage. So, can we really figure out how God works? No. So what apparently seems to be what we like and what we don't like is not always, it is apparent. They say what's happening may be just the opposite of what you think is happening. Therefore, again, we come back to the spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master clarifies everything and helps us understand that our activities in this world are not exactly the way we see them, nor are they beneficial for us. Therefore, one who takes shelter of the spiritual master gets what is called transcendental knowledge. And we'll talk about this tonight in this prayer, Guru Vandanam prayer, which is the subject matter for tonight's lecture. And in that prayer, there's one line, Divya Gyan Hriday Prakasito. You know that line? Right? Divya Gyan Hriday Prakasito. Chakshudan Diloye Janme Janme Prabhu say. Divya Gyan Hriday. What does that line mean? That the spiritual master infuses the sincere and eager disciple with transcendental knowledge. Eagerness, sincerity is what we say preliminary qualifications for transcendental knowledge. But submission to the instructions of the spiritual master allows for that knowledge to manifest within the heart. Many people read books. Many people hear transcendental knowledge. But how deep does it go? How much does it resonate? And how much are they actually able to act on it is only when one accepts the spiritual master's teachings as the teachings of God, non-different. Then when we have that faith, then that awakens within us the essence of the knowledge we hear. Because knowledge is more than just words. It's an awakening of understanding. It brings about transcendental realization, or it brings about knowledge, transcendental knowledge. It's compared to the sun. There's one beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita. Just like when the sun lights up everything by its presence in the daytime, transcendental knowledge lights up everything within our life. It makes everything completely clear. So that transcendental knowledge cannot be had by reading books. It has to be infused within you by the presence of the spiritual master who blesses you with transcendental knowledge when you please him through your execution of devotional service like that. So that's the process. So therefore, without the presence of the spiritual master in our life, we simply exist on the plane of mental speculation. Therefore, many persons who come to Krishna consciousness leave because they're not ready to surrender. That's the problem. We come, and Krishna says why people come to spiritual life. 4 kinds of people come to spiritual life. Those who are suffering materially, the distressed. Those who are looking for some economic gain, something material, through spirit. God owns everything. Therefore, if I just go to God, He can give me some of it. God owns everything. Therefore, if I go to God, He can give me some of it. He'll share it with me. And my way to get it is through prayer. And the third one is those who are curious. What is spiritual life? What is it all about? And the last one, and the best, is those who are looking for the absolute truth. Those who are seeking God as the goal of life. So 4 kinds of people come to spiritual life, but the first 2 come from material reasons. The third one comes from a quasi-spiritual reason, and the last comes for the best reason. So generally, we say that when people come to spiritual life, when they get their material desires satisfied, or when they get some relief from material distress, then they go back to the material world again because they've achieved their goal. But the real goal is to understand what is our existence, what is God, and how to relate to God in the most perfect and when we say most perfect way. And that only can be accessed with the presence of the spiritual master in our life. Therefore, a spiritual master is what we say the merciful manifestation of God, because he's giving these things freely to each and every one of us. Otherwise, we can't access it ourselves. There's no way. Any questions? Yes, Karuna, Parma Karuna.
Maharaj, I'm asking the same question which I asked yesterday. The Uttamadhikari or the highly elevated spiritual master can infuse bhakti by seeing or talking. Can you? You gave me the explanation yesterday, but can you elaborate this?
He's empowered to do that.
So how it is possible? Just by seeing you, he just infuse the bhakti.
When the wood is wet, the wood will catch fire. And when the wood is wet, the wood will not catch fire. When the wood is dry, it lights. So if the wood is in presence of fire, it doesn't immediately burn if it's wet. Only when the wood dries out will the fire begin. Right? So sadhu sangha sarva sastri hoy labamata sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. So what does that mean? That we continue to take association with sadhus until our consciousness reaches that stage of receptivity. Then immediately knowledge enters within us as a feature of our existence and not something on the intellectual level. In other words, you get enlightened when you're ready. So how do you get ready? You continue to associate and you continue to hear and you continue to serve. And you're in that part, you're drying out the wood. And at one time, it'll catch. Give you an example. Maybe all of you have had this experience. We have heard how many times we are not this body, right? We hear it all the time. Now, how many of you actually realize it? Realization is different than hearing it. Realization means it goes to the heart and you say, yes, it's true. So you hear it how many times? But when you hear it that one time and it goes to the heart, all of a sudden, all the results of hearing that all those previous times are culminated in that one experience. So that's why repetition of transcendental knowledge is the feature of disseminating this knowledge. We say it over and over and again until you get it. But you won't get it until you're ready to get it. And you have to prepare yourself to get ready. So even though you're not getting it, still, as you keep hearing it, you're becoming more and more qualified to receive it. And then someday, it'll come as a realization. Just like we say, the holy name is Krishna. So there's no difference. And so what is that verse? All the energies of the supreme absolute truth are found in that word Krishna. All of existence is in that word Krishna. All of everything is in that word Krishna. Krishna. That word Krishna is the full manifestation of the Godhead complete. Now you might say, how is that possible? On the intellectual level, you can't figure it out. But through the experience of chanting, and as you purify your consciousness, that knowledge is revealed to you as an experience, not as something intellectual. So that's how spiritual life works. Spiritual life is not a spectator sport. You got to dive into it in order to taste it. Philosophy is a way to the truth, but philosophy is not an end in itself. The philosophy points the way, but the way is surrender to the Lord.
So, to have a causeless mercy, we have to work for that, or causeless mercy comes automatically?
It's causeless because you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is be in the position to receive it.
Do we have to work for that?
You have to change your way of thinking. In other words, you have to make your consciousness receptive to the knowledge. And then understand it and practice it. It takes time. Just like if you want to plant a tree, you put the seed in the ground. You don't expect the tree to happen as soon as you put the seed in the ground. You have to water the seed, cultivate the ground, protect it from whatever dangers it may possibly encounter. So it takes time. So the analogy is that our love of God is like a full-blown plant that has flowers and beautiful leaves on it. But it starts with a simple seed. And that seed is planted by the spiritual master. You can't plant it yourself. Because he knows where to plant it and how to plant it like that. So you understand that point? All you have to do is be submissive to what is being offered. You use your intelligence to surrender, not your intelligence not to surrender. When all your intelligence should be directed in a way that brings you to the point of surrendering to God, not in a way that somehow or other is trying to avoid surrender to God.
So, Maharaj, let's say if a person is meeting his spiritual master, he doesn't know, he's a totally neophyte person. He's coming first time and seeing his spiritual master. He doesn't know that he is going to be his spiritual master. He sits and he talks with that person. And suddenly, we have heard these examples many times that he says that my spiritual master had given me a causeless mercy. I was not knowing anything about Krishna consciousness. He
Yeah.
just talked with me and I'm in.
Because
That's
when
a
he comes, he's open. He's open. Like many of us, we come, we're innocent, and we come, and we're open. But as soon as we start practicing for a while, we start coming up with our own misconceptions of what spiritual life is. Remain in that innocent, open stage in your whole life, and you find spiritual life is easy. Then you start, after a while, you start trying to figure it out. You start to, and we use that example of that devotee who was, always asking questions. We asked him to plant a garden, and then he intellectualized his experience with the garden. And he went back. When he became an innocent, humble servant of the Lord, everything was easy and nice. And as soon as his mind came in and started to try and figure it out according to his own understanding, he got confused again and lost everything. So, take the knowledge that's given to you and accept it. And if you can't understand it, clarify it through questions like that. But then again, you got to practice it. You have to practice it. So that immediate, initial, enlightened experience is God's blessing upon that person to inspire that person in spiritual life. But that's not the end in itself. That's just the initial contact that comes. From that initial contact, inspiration comes. And from that inspiration, wanting to go forward in that relationship continues. But then again, if we bring our own ideas into the relationship, it gets confused again, and we lose everything. Or we don't lose everything, we just get confused like that. So use your intelligence to understand, that's all. But don't use your intelligence to block the understanding. That's what we generally do. We try to figure it out. Just like I used that story about that simple man becoming the deity. The Lord told him, don't say anything. But he felt he was in a position, he had to say something. He was acting according to his own understanding. And therefore he ruined everything. So that's our problem. Make sense? Okay. Spiritual life is subtle. It's not something you can see. It's something you experience. But the activities are on the, on the gross level. But the change of existence is on the level of the consciousness. If we're not willing to change our consciousness, then there's no question of making any spiritual advancement. So therefore, we were saying, there's one music school in Vienna that when you go to apply, one of the questions they ask you, it's a very high-class school, have you had any musical experiences prior to coming here? And if you do, that's a disqualification. Because then they have to teach you how to forget about what you already learned so they can start from scratch and teach you the way they want. So all of us have our own understandings and conceptions, misconceptions. We just have to push it aside and use our intelligence to try to understand. As long as we think we know, it's an indication we don't know. When you think you know, that's a problem. When you think you don't know, you're ready to learn. That's the problem, right? You can teach somebody who's willing to, who says, I don't know, I'm willing to learn, but it's really hard to teach somebody who thinks they know. So therefore the spiritual master is there to help us unlearn, at the same time learn the right thing. Okay? Is another question? Sri Devi?
Maharaj, supposing you have a friend in Krishna consciousness who has a very good relationship with his spiritual master, you still don't have one, and then your friend says, why don't you get initiated by my Guru Maharaj or develop a relationship with him and see, and you're not entirely sure, and so he says, well, there's a trial period anyway, you can see how you feel about it, and you're neutral, should you go for it?
Why not? No one can tell you who your spiritual master, but people can introduce you to persons who are the spiritual master, and then from there you can evaluate due to your own experiences. If someone says this is your guru, that might be a problem. If someone says this person is a guru, it might be a good idea to hear from them. It sounds like they're giving you some advice. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
You have to choose yourself. Anything else? Yes, Linda? Anybody else after that? No?
Thank you, Maharaj. You were talking before in this morning's class about the etiquette between disciple and guru. Now, when you are not in the presence of the guru, you're writing to the guru, for instance, an email, sometimes it's hard to know how much from your material life can be placed on that communication because, I mean, my question is, doesn't some of the things you do in your material life affect your Krishna consciousness, and would that be appropriate to bring up in an email? Because you were talking about, you ask for service and you ask questions.
It might be appropriate to bring up because your material life does infringe and impinge both on your spiritual practice. You can't separate it. It does affect it a lot. But when you present it, how the response is given may not even deal with the question. Usually the spiritual master will evaluate the essence of the question and then give you the answer based on that. But you may need to present a big picture, and so an answer can be understood or given. So that's okay. But the problem with emails is the longer the emails, the more you become discouraged reading them. So we avoid long emails because get to the point. Don't write your whole life in one email. It can be a problem. Because when I see like page after page, I usually read for 1 or 2 pages and I put a check on this one. I'll read this when I feel better. Another time. So nobody likes long emails. Get to the point. Make it short. And you can write it long and then edit it. If you can't do it in the first shot, Yeah. I know one spiritual master, he even writes, please write, when you write to me, get to the point, make it short. Like that, so it gets tiring to read these long emails. Anything else? Yeah. We got Yakov and Derek.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the story of the deity, the sailor, and
Yeah.
the rich guy. So the poor man who got the rich man's wallet, so he could externally see that was definitely the Lord's mercy. Whereas the sailor, he actually doesn't see the Lord's mercy. He actually thinks this is a reversal in his life for some reason. So how can one basically essentially see the Lord's mercy in every situation, whether it's good or bad? So.
It takes some intelligence. And it takes some understanding of how the Lord works. When Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master, was asked, there's an old saying that, a cloud has a silver lining, A cloud is something negative, apparently. A silver lining is something that is good. That means, he said, no, that's not true. That's only true for devotees, not for people in general. Because for people in general, a cloud is simply a cloud. But generally for devotees, they're under the care of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, if something apparently negative comes not by way of their own activities, but by way of the Lord's mercy, it's leading to something better. It's leading to something better. And that story illustrates that, And the Lord wanted to arrange for the sailor to get arrested so he wouldn't have to go to sea. That seems to be. There's another story. And this is all the same one. The story of Akbar. Akbar came into the palace one day, and the cook had not shown up. So he decided to, cook for himself that day. So he was in the kitchen cutting, and he cut his finger. No, it wasn't the Akbar. Who is it? Chandrasekhar. Yeah, Chandrasekhar. And Gopal. Chandrasekhar the king. So he cut his finger, and he sliced a piece of his finger off. His servant, assistant, Gopal, and he came in, Gopal, and said, "Oh, that's the Lord's mercy." And Chandrasekhar got completely angry and put Gopal in jail. He couldn't, he didn't want that kind of response. So the next day, Chandrasekhar decided to go out on a hunting trip. And he was captured by cannibals. And then they were going to take him and put him in boiling oil and cook him and have him for, prashad. King Royal Prashad. So, but then I saw a piece of his finger was missing. And according to cannibal philosophy, you can't cook an incomplete human. It's against their rules. So they let him go. So then he understood. Wow, what Gopal said was true. It was actually the Lord's mercy. But then he said to Gopal, and after he came back, he let Gopal out of jail. He said, "Gopal, you were right. But how is it God's mercy that I put you in jail?" He says, "Because I was supposed to go with you on that trip." So that was a problem. So what appears to be something may be something different. You can't really say, In this world, things work like that. So devotees always depend on the mercy of the Lord. They don't depend so much on their own understanding of how things should happen or should not happen. They act in a very practical way, using their intelligence, but they understand there's a higher principle, and that is what God wants. And doesn't always fit into our way of thinking or our logic like that. Is that okay? Yeah. That's why you need a spiritual master. That's what comes back to the same point. Without the spiritual master, you can't understand anything. Yes, Derek.
Dr. Luke and I were talking yesterday after class, and we're talking about qualifications of somebody who's aspiring or looking to aspire for a spiritual master.
Mm-hmm.
And you had mentioned the qualification of eagerness to get out of material life and the qualifications of a disciple. And we were also talking about the necessity of cultivating patience to have full faith in the person that you're going to aspire for. So these, to me, they seem almost contradictory. Like, if we're eager, how can we have patience? I wondered if you could clear up that distinction.
Well, yeah, Rupa Goswami explains, Utsaha Nistaya Daryat. Utsaha means enthusiasm, Nistaya means determination, and Daryat means patience. So Rupa Goswami's explanation that is there are 6 things that are favorable for devotional service. The first is enthusiasm. Second is determination. Third is patience. Fourth is hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. The fifth is giving up the association of materialistic people. And the sixth is following in the footsteps of those who are teaching. In other words, following the principles of spiritual life. So the first 3 are more or less activities that we can engage in. We have to be enthusiastic. But at the same time, we have to be determined when there's obstacles. Our obstacles should not, what we say, diffuse or dilute our enthusiasm. In fact, for a person who is actually enthusiastic, obstacles are opportunities to go further forward like that. And therefore, spiritual life is not something you can just automatically, your enthusiasm Just like people think nowadays that if I'm enthusiastic, I should get it immediately. But that doesn't happen. Prabhupada used the example, a woman gets married, she says, I have a husband, where's the baby? Well, everything's in place, the baby will take time to appear. So anything good takes time. So enthusiasm prepares us or inspires us in the practice. And patience is required. Therefore, sustained enthusiasm is required in order to practice. Because it's not something that comes automatically. And patience is cultivated in association with devotees. If you're not in association with devotees, it's very hard to remain patient. You give up your enthusiasm. So seeking association with those persons who are enthusiastic maintains your enthusiasm. And patience means in due course of time it will come. Like that. Determination is what sustains enthusiasm. You could apply this even in the material world. A person's enthusiastic to get a good degree, but as soon as you enter into the university, you can't expect a degree to happen. You have to go through all the responsibilities that come by way of receiving the degree. It may take years. So if you're impatient, you'll drop out of school. The same with spiritual life. It takes time. But along the way, you're getting something. It's not like nothing's happening. The first installment of Krishna's mercy is you start to free yourself from material suffering. That's the first installment. When you take the spiritual life, your material suffering decreases. And then gradually you start to become peaceful. Then you become, because without peace there's no happiness. And as long as we're suffering materially, we can't be peaceful. So Krishna gives us first relief from material suffering, then we start becoming peaceful, and then when we start becoming peaceful, we start becoming happy. So that's how it works. And then that happiness increases, and then when gradually we start to develop our attraction for Krishna. So ultimately the goal is, there's 9 stages to receive the goal. The first one is, patience, enthusiasm, association with devotees, faith. Like that. These are all preliminary. So when you know the goal, it's easier to become enthusiastic. If you don't know the goal, then you might think, why am I enthusiastic? You have to know the goal. What is the goal? The goal is pure love for God, or complete fulfillment of all of one's desires perfectly and completely. So, but if you don't know the goal, then it appears to be contradictory. That makes sense? Okay. Sri Devi?
Maharaj, supposing in the prosecution of one's devotional service, for some reason, maybe impatience or bad circumstances or something, one deviates, one loses the mercy of the spiritual master, is it possible to get it back or impossible?
It's always possible. The spiritual master is very merciful. That's his business. His business is to be very merciful. He's the embodiment of Lord Nityananda, and Lord Nityananda is the most merciful. He gave love of God to Jagai and Madai.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You only lose the mercy when you give up. If you a little child keeps falling down, but doesn't mean the parents give up on him because he can't walk. Now, the mercy is always there as long as you keep trying. But you got to learn from your mistakes. If you keep making the same mistake all over and over again, then the spiritual master says, this is a tough case. I think I have to use some stronger measures on this one. So the idea is that, we're struggling, we're making mistakes, but try to learn from your mistakes so you don't do it again. It saves a lot of time. Anything else? Yes, Glenn.
In talking about our relationship with the spiritual master, I was thinking about the love between the spiritual master and his disciple, and how we cultivate that love, and how they kind of come together. The spiritual master is coming from an exalted level, and I'm coming from a very simple level. They're both love, but they're at very different levels. How do they work together, and how do they
How
meet?
do you show your love? Is that it, or how do you?
How do we show it? How do those two loves
What is
come
actually
together?
love in that relationship?
Yeah.
Love is service. Love is obedience. What is they say in the Christian tradition? Christ says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Right? So you show your love by obedience, right? You can't say I love you, but I'm not going to do what you say. The wife says to the husband, "I love you, but I know you want dinner, but I'm too busy." Where's the love? Love is service. If you love someone, you try to think what pleases them, and then you do it. So in the case of the spiritual master, the more enthusiastic you are to carry out the instructions, the more you're actually showing your love, because he's delivering back to you your relationship with Krishna, and therefore when you start feeling the presence of Krishna in your life, naturally you're going to love the spiritual master because he's giving you something wonderful. He's giving you Krishna.
When I was in first and second grade, I went to a Catholic school, and we had what was called the Baltimore Catechism.
Baltimore Catechism?
Yes, because there was a council in Baltimore, and they determined what do children need to be learning about
In
the
school.
Lord and spirituality.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, why God made us? And the answer to the question, why did God make you? God made me to show forth His goodness and to share His everlasting and happiness in heaven. And then there was another similar question, what our purpose? To know, love, and serve God.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had trouble with that word serve. I thought, it sounds
everybody
like,
does.
Yeah. I mean, I had I just would think about it at night. And it sounds like I'll be a slave forever. And so...
We use even a stronger word, surrender. Where's the gun? He asking me to surrender. It's like a holdup. Yeah, it sounds kind of, like you're actually losing something. It means when you surrender, it means you lost the war, so you got to surrender. But what we're surrendering is our false independence. We have nothing to surrender. We have to surrender the misconception that we have something to surrender. That's the whole thing. So service really is another, surrender means service, service means surrender. Question? We got Jitendriya Prabhu.
One thing that comes to mind is by the mercy of Krishna, one gets a spiritual master, and by the mercy of the spiritual master, one gets Krishna. I always like that one.
Yeah. When you look for God, God sends Guru. And when you get Guru, Guru gives you your connection with God. God, when you look for God, you can't find God, but you can find God in the form of His representative. That's the process. Okay. Anything else? We lost. The questions have died down, yes. Do we have any questions from online? Chaitanya Nitai has a question.
I had a question trying to understand. Sometimes the spiritual master might give you an instruction, but at that moment or at that time, you're not able to carry it out. But you're able to, maybe in the future, you're able to do it. Does the spiritual master know you might not be able to carry that out, or is it displeasing? Or maybe you could explain a little bit more.
The question is, when he gives you the instruction, he knows that you can't do it directly or immediately?
Maybe he doesn't know you won't be able to do it, but just maybe he gives you an instruction like Bhaktisiddhanta gave Prabhupada this instruction to print books and to preach in the Western countries. And at that moment, he wasn't able to do it. But
that instruction was given to everybody. Bhaktisiddhanta told all his disciples to preach overseas. He didn't, and those who were qualified or who were enthusiastic, they went. But Prabhupada was the only one that was successful. Well, that's the distinction. So there are certain instructions that are seed planting instructions which will fructify when the situation is right. Prabhupada couldn't do it immediately because of his material situation, but he was always thinking how to do it. So when you get an instruction where you can't immediately fulfill it, if you're thinking how to do it, then that is good. That's what's wanted. But if you think, oh, I can't do it, then you're defeated already. Situations do change. Anything else? Shivani, Shivangi? Any questions? Huh? You're going to get the microphone. Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah. So, like yesterday, you spoke that your spiritual master will never give you any instruction because he will know that you won't be able to follow it, and in that ways, there is no like chance of.
That's selective. He can see in certain cases that certain persons cannot receive the instructions they need to hear. Like sometimes we can see this person needs to do this. It's obvious, but we don't say it because they won't do it. So if they won't do it, that's an offense, because when you get an instruction and you don't do it, it's an offense. So to keep the person connected to the spiritual master and to the process, a lesser instruction which they can do is given. And that's only done in certain persons who are not really ready to surrender. Their surrender is conditional. Like that. But what he's speaking about is a little different. Is that it's about, taking it into the heart and eventually doing it in due course of time. And not rejecting it because it's something I don't want to do. Yeah.
Prabhupada, until he did it and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was there, So it was seemingly that he couldn't do it like that, but eventually he was planning how to do it and he did it.
Yeah,
So
the first volume of Satyarup Maharaj's Satyarup Maharaj's biography and the life of Srila Prabhupada. There's 6 volumes. The first volume is a lifetime in preparation. So Prabhupada was preparing his life to carry out that instructions. He never forgot it. He kept it as foremost. He had his business, he had his family. And gradually, when he got free from those things, he was able to eventually carry out the instruction. So it took him a while, but he never gave up on the instruction. That's all. And Bhaktisiddhanta never gave up on him, knowing that he would do it. Actually, he knew he was going to do it. He could see that. Others tried, and they came back with some results, but nothing substantial. Many devotees, some of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's disciples went to England. They had association with some of the people in the royal parliament, were presenting Krishna consciousness to the upper echelon of London at the time. They were welcomed, received, treated properly, and listened to, but it was more of a cordial. There was nothing, people really didn't want to change. They were just respecting these sadhus from India, because India was formerly their colonial, like that. So that went on. They came back. They went to Burma. They went to Germany. But nothing. Prabhupada came to America. Where did he start? With the hippies. He started in the most unlikely place. But he was successful. And Prabhupada said, I didn't want to go to London. I decided to go to New York instead, because if I was thinking if I would fail, I wanted to fail in a new place. I didn't want to fail in the same place my godbrothers failed. So. But then he also said, I was thinking of New York, I was dreaming of New York. He said, I was even dreaming New York, I was even thinking while I was dreaming I was there in New York. That's how much he was thinking of New York. So Krishna inspired him that way.
Maharaj, can you speak?
Shivangi.
Yes, Maharaj. Maharaj, can you speak a little bit about when Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said that one has to deserve and then desire? So, as far as we have understood that a disciple or an aspiring disciple is never ever qualified in front of his or her spiritual master. So, was he talking about a threshold that one has to come up to a level to deserve something like?
Deserve and desire means, in other words, for something to manifest, certain things have to be in place. And just like, I guess, what an example would be is, you want to do a particular service. Just like you come to Krishna consciousness and you want to preach. But you may not be able to qualify yourself to preach. You may not be able to preach. So then qualify yourself, and then when you come to the qualifications, then you can preach. So that's deserving and then desiring. So keep the desire in your heart, but then again, then you have to deserve to get that desire by showing, the qualifications like that. But there's another thing, you can desire to desire. I don't have the desire, but I pray for the desire to have the desire. Just like I want to be humble, but I somehow or other I can't be humble. And I try to be humble, so I'm praying to have the qualifications to be humble. The goal is to be humble, but to go directly, sometimes we need the mercy. So it's like that. We can pray, we can desire to desire. You follow? Thank you. Sri Devi, I can't see you back there. Oh, there you go.
Maharaj, what if by some chance I have reached the point where I have enough faith to take initiation, but after that point, maybe because of false ego or circumstances, I really don't want to do anything more. I'm just keeping to the principles, I'm doing my chanting, I'm doing whatever I need to, but I don't want to go any further.
Then you won't go any further. You'll stay where you are. But the thing is, spiritual life works in such a way as if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. Because the current of this world it pushes you towards the material existence. So if you're not working against that, you're being pulled down more and more into material energy. So as soon as you stop practicing or struggling to go forward, you're going backwards. There's no such thing as staying in one place. You're either becoming more spiritual or more material. It's just the way it works. You can't stay in one place. The world doesn't work like that. You just can. Nobody will let you anyway. Nobody will leave you alone. You can't stay in one place.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So that's a dangerous proposition. It's not practical. You can expect to go backwards as soon as you stop trying to go forward. The current of this world pushes you towards material life. Okay. We still have about 13 minutes. Yes, Shasha.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was wondering how a spiritual master knows his disciple when most of the time he travels, and to know what kind of instructions to give him.
Well, sometimes he asks those persons who are in the same area, like the temple commander and others, how his disciples doing. It's both mystical and practical. We use the practical, but sometimes the mystical is there also. It's mostly practical. When someone wants to know how their disciple is doing, they ask, well, how's my disciple doing? We say, Nityananda Pran, how is, let's see, oops. How is, are there any disciples here from Chicago? Nitai Nataraj, okay. Oh. So I asked the temple president how Nitai Nataraj is doing. And if he tells me, I just take his word. I can also ask my disciple, how you doing? Or, then I can pray to Krishna and ask him, how is he doing? So there's different ways to bring about knowledge like that. We use the practical way, though.
Guru Maharaj, this is Maria. It's her question. She's watching us online. She says, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is not partial to anyone. Is that true also with the guru-disciple relationship?
Yeah. Partial means that as you approach, you get reciprocated. So it seems like God is impartial, but he's not, because he's reciprocating according to how you approach. So one is approaching one way, they're getting something. One's approaching another way, they're getting something different. So that's his impartiality. So it comes, you get what you deserve according to how you're approaching the Lord. But then there's another additive feature that the Lord can also give special mercy. But he generally doesn't do that until someone recognizes you. If the spiritual master says to the Lord, this person needs some special mercy, the Lord gives it. That's why the spiritual master is so valuable, because you can be fool number one, and still get a lot of mercy if the spiritual master wants, if it says to Krishna, you'll get it. Because Krishna always listens to his pure devotees. Yeah, it's just like, if you commit a crime and you go to jail, but somehow or other, the governor comes in and you get a pardon, and then you're released. It's only by the governor's pardon that you got released from the prison. So someone else intercedes on your behalf. So that's the spiritual master. That's why he's called the mercy manifestation of God. He's giving extra mercy. Because we need it. We need it. We're mercy cases. We need mercy. Anything else? Is there any more questions from the cyberspace? No. No? Okay. Should we end here? Yes, Lochan Das. What a name, Lochan Das. Amazing. How'd you ever get such a nice name?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thanks for the class. Maharaj, I'd like to just thank you for all your guidance that you have gave me over the years, the last 10 years. And you've been very intermenstrual. Well, I'm a little choked up here, but you know what I'm talking about.
I got it.
As far as my advancement in Krishna conscious, the last 10 years to be exact. And I'd just like to thank you for all your guidance.
Thank you.
And all your mercy. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for being you. Thank you. Lochan, sweetheart. Okay, so one cannot live by philosophy alone. Time to take prasad. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari. Shri Shri Kishore Kishori ki jai.
Take these up and put it back in as well. Yeah, how much do I have to give you for the trip? It's like $250. All right, I'll give you that later. My other question was the sheets. Are those yours or those? They're mine. In the Philippines. Yep. Okay. So pack everything as you can pack. Lock up the room nicely. And then I'll be back. I should be back by 3:34. Okay.
Or something. I don't know.
Stay here.
I don't know whether they'll allow.
Wow, that's nice.